Welcome back. This is Hope Roski with business, arts, events, and more cool stuff. Well, we left the military and now we are going over to law enforcement. So when we talk about people who serve, and they serve with passion and they serve unconditionally, we're also talking about our law enforcement in the area. Many times we think about law enforcement and we think about, okay, they're here to serve and protect, but many times on the job we have law enforcement that gets injured on the job, and what happens when we say life after the badge. So today we're talking with three gentlemen here. I'd like to welcome you all to the show. We have off here to my left, we have George Ozburn, we have Bryan Lehman, and we have John Gamez back here, and all have served, and I welcome you to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what you did to serve and protect, and then I'll let each one of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you. George, we'll start with you.
Okay, my name is George Ozburn, and I started with the Sheriff's Department back in 1997. Served approximately just a short of 15 years. In 2009, I was shot in the line of duty, so I've been medically retired. And then was looking for purpose in that struggle that I was experiencing afterwards. And that's when I slowly started beginning life after the badge. And then I'll let you transition to...
Okay, so let's go over to you, Bryan. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about your service.
Hi, my name is Bryan Lehman. I started the Sheriff's Office in 2002, and I'm currently going through the medical retirement process due to having my right hip replaced, just from wear and tear of sitting in a patrol car year after year.
Thank goodness. Okay, John, what about you? Welcome.
Hi. I first worked at the Sheriff's Department, and so I know these fine guys.
Yes.
For 6 years, and then I went over to Clovis PD where I finished out my career, so I did 20 years.
So you were with the sheriffs, and then you went over to Clovis PD.
Then I went to Clovis PD.
Okay, so you guys then, you gentlemen then collaborated and to formulate a podcast, which I think is pretty awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast and how that came to be, George?
Yeah, so it was really cool. I had started doing something called Life After the Badge. I started with 4 deputies, and we just recently 210 members now. So it's phenomenal. One of our biggest evening functions. It's more of a camaraderie-based therapy, where it was an evening where we had over 75 members show up, and it was phenomenal. I had started doing that as well as some videos for Code 9 Project as well as Life After the Badge. And unbeknownst to me, John had started Brothers Keepers, and it was a podcast that he had me go on. And I'll let him tell you a little about the podcast, but what happened is we combined the two, and now we're doing the Circle of Guardians podcast.
So two have become one,
Yep, yes.
Unified. That's great. So John, tell us a little bit more about that then.
Well, we started, it started between my brother and myself. We were both going through the ending of relationships. So we were going through a hard time.
So this is kind of out of something bad, now it's turned into something positive and good. Okay.
So through that process, we kind of learned that we were the type of people that would not reach out for help, right? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? So we went online, we're looking for ways to express ourselves, get things out in a healthy way, and we couldn't find anything. But ultimately, we kept each other, we took care of each other, and so we came up with the idea, like, hey, I know there's a lot of guys out there, especially, from my profession, that I know they're like this. They won't ask for help because you go through these thoughts that are, you'll go down a rabbit hole, you'll spiral out of control, whether it's through substance abuse or just bad behavior, just behavior that's not. And how do we stay out of that? My brother helped me, and I helped him. So the idea was, let's get in front of the camera and talk about this. And he didn't want to. Neither did I, I'll be honest. But I thought we had to, because you had to be vulnerable for people to listen.
Sure.
So we started as Brothers Keeper, and combining efforts with George and a lot of other guys that I met in other agencies. It became the Circle of Guardians.
So Bryan, how often is your show, and how can people start to tune into this?
So our show, we record our show once a week, usually on the weekend. And we have been posting our show every Thursday on YouTube and Spotify, and we were on Instagram for a while, but we're primarily through YouTube now.
Okay, so you're through YouTube. So George, can you tell us a little bit here about how people can exactly tune in, like through the YouTube? What's your link there?
Yeah, so we are now transitioning where we're doing the smaller segments, 2-part series. So when you see episode 3, there'll be an episode 1 and an episode 2. And you can actually just type in Circle of Guardians when you're researching it. But if you wanted to really do it, you're going to have to read the numbers because I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see.
I believe that's a 6799, and I don't have mine on either.
Right? See? And the really cool thing is that it combined a lot of stuff. It's very raw. So when you go to this podcast, you're going to hear things that you wouldn't expect to hear. Mm-hmm. And the biggest consensus was that we had to get past the level. The intention is that whether it's law enforcement, when you look at the Life After the Badge, hopefully we can show that that logo as well as the Circle of Guardians logo. Mm-hmm. You will see that it involves fire, EMS, dispatch, corrections, as well as law enforcement. And in the middle, there's family. Because without that, our families are suffering as well. And we wanted to cut through a lot of the, for lack of better terms, the walls and boundaries that have been placed on law enforcement when they're dealing with life stressors.
Oh, sure.
Not just including or limited to PTSD. And so there's a lot of exposure. And in order for these gentlemen here, as well as myself, to stand up and say, hey, sometimes we're not right. And we need to be able to say that. We found that in law enforcement circles, you're not allowed to say if you need help because then you're considered weak. There's a lot of fear of retribution that happens, as well as even getting displaced or replaced in your department. Mm. And so how are you supposed to get help? And statistics show that the average person, a normal citizen, goes through maybe 3 critical incidents in their lifetime. And the average law enforcement officer goes through, 180?
180.
180.
I can't even imagine that magnitude. I mean,
so when you leave, this is a lot of times when I started speaking to people. As I started reaching out, the group it grew slowly because they'd reach out. The law enforcement officer are very skeptical. Right. They want to know what's going on. They're like, why are you calling me? Why are you asking? Once we got through that, it didn't matter if they retired because of injury, they retired because of time was on the service, or other incidents that have happened. They all experienced the same thing, a cutoff from the brotherhood. Mm. And the fact that they had things they needed to share. And in that quiet time, and I call it the quiet, I literally, you can go through the thing, I call it the quiet, is when these things start processing and things you thought you got past start coming up and you start having these issues. And then we started going together and realizing that sometimes we were affecting our relationships, not only with our spouses and significant others, with other things that happen. And there's a high aptitude for people doing self-medication, mm-hmm. Regardless of what that is, because they are not allowed to go out and seek that help. So we wanted to be able to cut through that. We wanted to be able to reach people that are currently on the department so that they know that they're not alone, because everybody feels alone. They're like, I was thinking that
right.
And now we're here cutting through it and
so
saying
this is really a way to help validate people who have served in law enforcement or other aspects, whether it's fire, etc., and just a base of the men and women who have supported selflessly in the community. A lot of times people will say, leave your personal life at home when you go to the job, and then when you walk through the doors, it's like, well, you better leave work at work and then turn it on and off. It's like that switch. And in law enforcement, I have a brother who's retired law enforcement as well. It's sometimes there's that very fine line. I will just say that. I will not speak on my brother's behalf, but I can say through those I have known in law enforcement, there's a very fine line, and it's very difficult because nobody really knows until they're out there and doing it what you see and what you have experienced during the day. And Bryan, it's interesting, you said you had hip replacement surgery due to having to be in a patrol car for elongated periods of time. Many times law enforcement, yes, you're on foot, or you may have to chase after someone, but it's also hours of being in a patrol car, watching, monitoring, and things can happen to a body physically as well. Is that from what you shared, correct?
Absolutely. The ergonomics in the cars are poor because everything you need to touch is in the center console. So you're constantly leaning to the right and curving your spine to the left so you can type and work the radio and look at the monitor and everything.
And so people just, they don't necessarily think about those other details as well. So let's go through some of the pictures and tell us a little bit about what we're seeing. Each one of you, please feel free to share when you,
Okay,
Bryan?
that picture was me and a coworker at a fellow deputy's funeral. That was at the viewing of the body after he had passed away.
And tell us a little bit about this, John.
This was actually the first time? The first time we filmed at the studio here locally at CMAC in Fresno. So we kind of wanted to memorialize that. George took the pictures, of course. He's in front, right?
Right. You know.
Okay, so this is a Purple Heart. George, tell us a little bit about the significance of that.
So for me, you know, I'm very honored to receive that. It was my honor. In 2009, I was shot in the line of duty responding to a domestic disturbance call, and I was hit twice, so I had 4 bullet scars. And later on, the funny thing was the Purple Heart got lost. I wasn't able to go get it when they wanted it, and so it was many years later that I got a call from a captain saying, "Hey George, we found your Purple Heart in a drawer.
Wow.
Would you like it?" And I was like, "Yes, I would." And so they just kind of handed it to me and said thank you, and then shook my hand. But it meant a lot to me that I was able to give this, and I'll hand it on to my kids because I was honored to serve.
What's interesting is I heard the domestic calls are probably some of the worst to go on. Am I accurate in that statement? Most dangerous, yes. I mean, like I said, I really appreciate the men and women that serve. Okay, one more picture here that we have. And George, tell us a little bit about why these...
That's how he really is.
That's how he really... Exactly. Well, and you know, the candid part, so now it's like, okay, you've gone through recovery, but now you're able to do some of these runs to help support law enforcement. Tell us a little bit about that, so if there are people out there who want to join and be a part of it, they can.
So this is really cool because the Support the Blue Run is a phenomenal run that put on by the Fresno PD Chaplaincy Program. And they reach out. It's every year through Woodward Park, and it is massive. They have vendors out there and stuff like that, so I always encourage people. And I didn't want to lose track. I wanted to give back. The law enforcement world has given me brothers like this that I will carry for a lifetime. And I realized at first I felt almost like, well, the department let me down, but my brothers won't. And so I always tell people... Or sisters, brothers, sisters, and our dispatchers.
I've got to interject it yet in dispatchers.
I don't want to ever forget my dispatchers.
The dispatchers are paramount because they're the ones who get you to where you need to be and make sure that where you're going, you're gonna be on point.
They're the voice in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
They're the light for us because that is our true lifeline. And the EMS people from American Ambulance that risked their lives to come in to get me, even though they're not armed when we didn't know where the shooter was. I tip my hat to all of them. I mean, I'm very blessed, and it took a long time to have these blessings be realized in my own mind because of the trauma I experienced. But yeah, and that's why it's imperative that I give back to these, to all of them, including the families.
Even the fire guys, even though we make fun of each other.
I know. Well, I know. There's like a quiet rivalry between the two. My brother used to say when the firemen would come in, that people would cheer, and when law enforcement came in, it would be a completely different feeling. But the thing is that everybody has to work together, and the goal is to make the community a safer place. Let's go ahead and go through a couple more pictures. There was, I know that's George, that's you in uniform, and there was like another one here, right there. There we go. Let's take a look at that, and tell us a little bit about this picture here.
Well, I spent 12 of the years of the 20, I was a SWAT operator. I spent 2 of those as a team leader, so that was a really great time in my career.
So that was your SAU?
My what?
Special,
yeah. She knows
she's
stuff.
on it.
I
Yeah.
know.
Correctly, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
The reason why I know is I have a family member who was SWAT.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's pretty intensive, and I do realize that. So and what's interesting, if we can come back live here, we can talk a little bit about, you know, with SWAT, many times your shift is changing every month. So sometimes and that's the other thing with law enforcement too, is that your hours can be absolutely crazy. What were some of the shifts like, John? What were some of the shifts that you worked?
In what aspect you're talking about?
Like your days, like how they would sometimes run right into another.
I kept mine routine. You get up, you work out, and you go home, take a shower, then you're right back at work again. And then sometimes the shifts go over. You're working,
Right.
usually it was a 10 or 12-hour shift. And then I was on call 24/7. So there's times I went home and my phone goes off 30 minutes later, and then we got to swap all out. So sometimes, it's hard to get regular sleep and be a regular person, and on top of trying to have a family at the same time. So
Right, absolutely. So, in closing, I just want the viewers to one more time know where to go if they want to be able to see your podcast and listen in, because you guys work really great together, and I could just kind of see how there's this fraternal brotherhood here, and I'm sure there's some other sisters out there who need to talk to these guys too. If not, I'll be your adopted one that comes in every once in a while. But
come on in.
The person who appreciates what you do. But anyway, yes, tell us one more time, George, how people can tune in and watch your podcast.
So please take the opportunity to go to YouTube and go to Circle of Guardians. You can also find us on Facebook as well. You can look us up directly by using our names as well. If you had any questions, you can DM us, message us. We're readily available for you, any comments. And then if there's something you'd like to know about, you want a question, you want to keep it anonymous, send it to us, and we'll address it live on the air.
I think that's right. Go
I
ahead.
want to say that we do talk about the things no one wants to talk about. So don't think if someone sends us a question we want to answer, we will.
We will.
And
That's
part
great.
of our show.
That's wonderful. Well, it sounds great, and I definitely have had a chance to take a look through Facebook. George has sent the links, and I just think what you gentlemen are doing is fantastic. So, John Gamez, George Ozburn, Bryan Lehman, thank you so much for coming in today to Central Valley Talk, and we will see you all next week. Thank you, and make it a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.